The Eastern Roman Empire stood at the height of its power, ruling vast cities, wealthy trade routes, and some of the most disciplined armies in the world. Roman commanders viewed the deserts of Arabia as barren wastelands filled with scattered tribes that could never threaten imperial authority. When reports first arrived that Muslim forces were advancing into Syria, many officers dismissed them with laughter. They believed no desert army could stand against the strength of Rome. But strange rumors began spreading through military camps. Soldiers whispered about a commander who moved faster than any general they had ever faced. Entire garrisons were falling before reinforcements could arrive. Fortified cities surrendered after brief resistance. Small Muslim forces were defeating armies far larger than themselves. The name behind these stories was Khalid ibn al-Walid. As fear quietly spread among the ranks, Emperor Heraclius ordered one of the largest military gatherings the eastern provinces had seen in years. Romans, Armenians, Slavs, and Christian Arab allies marched together beneath shining banners and religious crosses. Thousands of armored soldiers filled the plains of Syria, convinced they would crush the Muslims in a single overwhelming battle. Yet far away, Khalid studied the land carefully. He was not preparing merely to fight Rome. He was preparing to break it. Before the Battle of Yarmouk, Khalid ibn al-Walid had already become a figure surrounded by fear and legend. Years earlier, he had fought against the Muslims and earned a reputation as one of Arabia's finest cavalry commanders. He understood how great armies moved, how commanders thought under pressure, and how panic could destroy even disciplined soldiers. After accepting Islam, his military talent seemed unstoppable. He led daring campaigns across harsh deserts, where enemies believed no army could survive. He attacked suddenly, moved with incredible speed, and forced opponents into confusion before battles had fully begun. Again and again, larger forces collapsed before his smaller, but highly disciplined troops. Warriors began calling him the Sword of Allah, a title that spread across Arabia and Syria alike. Now, at Yarmouk, he faced the greatest challenge of his life. The Roman army stretched across the plains in enormous numbers, with heavily armored infantry, skilled cavalry, and allies from many regions. Their campfires lit the night horizon like a second city. Some Muslim soldiers felt fear as they looked upon the massive enemy force. Khalid noticed the uncertainty immediately. Instead of showing concern, he rode calmly through the camps, strengthening morale and reorganizing his forces for speed, discipline, and sudden attack. The Battle of Yarmouk began beneath a blazing summer sun as Roman drums echoed across the plains. Massive formations of infantry marched forward behind shields, while cavalry units moved along the flanks, attempting to surround the Muslim army. Dust rose into the air as thousands of soldiers clashed with swords, spears, and arrows. The noise of battle became deafening. The Roman army used its numbers to pressure the Muslim lines from multiple directions. Several Muslim units struggled under the heavy assault, and some warriors began retreating toward the rear in fear. For a moment, it seemed the Roman advance might break the Muslim army entirely. But the retreating soldiers were met by the women and families inside the camp, who refused to let them flee. They shouted at the warriors, shaming them and forcing many to turn back toward the battlefield. The sudden return of these fighters helped stabilize the collapsing lines. Khalid ibn al-Walid watched every movement carefully. He realized the Roman army was powerful but slow to adapt. Using fast cavalry units, he launched repeated attacks against weak points in the Roman formations, striking quickly before disappearing into the dust again. Day after day, the fighting continued, and exhaustion slowly spread through both armies as Khalid prepared the decisive move that would change everything. On the final morning of battle, Khalid ibn al-Walid launched the attack he had carefully planned for days. Before sunrise, he gathered his strongest cavalry units and positioned them against the Roman flanks. As the fighting began, Muslim horsemen charged with incredible speed, smashing into the Roman cavalry and forcing them away from the battlefield. Suddenly, the massive Roman infantry formations were left exposed and vulnerable. Dust storms swept across the plains, making it difficult for Roman commanders to communicate. Orders became confused, and entire units struggled to understand what was happening around them. Some soldiers believed they had already been surrounded. Others thought their commanders had fallen. Fear began spreading faster than the battle itself. Khalid used the confusion perfectly. His cavalry moved behind Roman lines, cutting off escape routes and driving enemy soldiers toward the steep ravines near the Yarmouk River. The enormous Roman army began crushing inward as terrified men pushed against one another, desperate to escape. Then panic exploded across the battlefield. Thousands of Roman soldiers broke formation and fled toward the cliffs. But the narrow paths became clogged with men, horses, and shattered equipment. Some soldiers were pushed over the edge by the stampede, while others jumped willingly to escape the advancing cavalry behind them. By the end of the battle, the plains near Yarmouk were covered with broken weapons, abandoned banners, and the bodies of thousands of soldiers. What had once been one of the strongest armies assembled by the Eastern Roman Empire had collapsed into chaos and terror. Survivors fled across Syria carrying horrifying stories of the disaster, while entire Roman units simply vanished during the retreat near the ravines. For Emperor Heraclius, the defeat was devastating. The empire had invested enormous resources into stopping the Muslim advance, believing overwhelming numbers would guarantee victory. Instead, the Roman army had been shattered in only a few days. According to later accounts, Heraclius looked back toward Syria as he departed and sadly spoke farewell to the province forever. The victory at Yarmouk transformed the balance of power in the region. Important cities such as Damascus and Jerusalem soon became vulnerable as Roman defenses weakened. Muslim forces rapidly expanded across Syria, changing the political and religious history of the Middle East permanently. Military historians later studied the battle for centuries, trying to understand how a smaller army defeated a far larger imperial force. Many concluded that Khalid ibn al-Walid's true weapon was not numbers or armor, but his mastery of movement, discipline, timing, and psychological warfare against frightened enemies. After the Battle of Yarmouk, Khalid ibn al-Walid's reputation spread far beyond Arabia and Syria. To many people, he became more than a military commander. He became a symbol of unstoppable strategy and fearless leadership. Stories about his victories traveled through trade routes, military camps, and royal courts, where even his enemies admitted his brilliance on the battlefield. What made Khalid so dangerous was not simply courage or aggression. He understood how armies behaved under fear. He knew that once panic entered the minds of soldiers, even the largest force could collapse within moments. At Yarmouk, he used speed, terrain, and confusion like weapons, turning the battlefield itself into a trap from which the Romans could not escape. Historians still debate the exact number of Roman soldiers who died during the battle and retreat. Ancient chroniclers often exaggerated army sizes, but nearly all agree that the defeat was catastrophic. The image of terrified soldiers trapped near the ravines became one of the most haunting scenes in military history. Yarmouk changed the future of the Middle East forever. The Roman Empire lost control over much of Syria, and Muslim expansion accelerated rapidly afterward. Centuries later, the battle remains remembered as one of history's greatest examples of tactical genius defeating overwhelming numbers.